Thank you so much, Shiva.
Thank you so much, Professor Shiva. Always a delight to hear from you. And we're honored to have you with us this session. Now I'm going to introduce the people who will be conducting this session, Dr. Ananya Dasgupta and Dr. Vasudha Karchu. Dr. Dasgupta directs the Center for Writing and Pedagogy at Kriya University, where she is also an associate professor of literature in the Division of Literature and the Arts. Prior to this, she set up the Center for Writing Studies at OP Jindal Global University and taught at Shiv Nadar University, where her journey in writing pedagogy in India began. She trained in writing pedagogy at the writing program at Rutgers University, where she also earned her doctorate from the Department of Literatures in early modern literature. Among her publications are Magical Epistemologies, Forms of Knowledge in Early Modern English Drama, and a book of poems, Between Sure Places. She has also co-edited, along with Madhura Lohkare, a collection of essays, Writing in Academia, 2019. Welcome, Dr. Dasgupta. Dr. Vasudha Karchu is a faculty associate at the Center for Writing and Pedagogy, Kriya University. She has a PhD in sociology from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Her doctoral research is on the autonomous women's movement in India and examines questions of mobilization, organization, form, and feminist thought and practice within this movement. Her other research projects have been on contemporary Indian feminism, student politics, and academic writing. Her interest in academic writing includes both the stylistic elements and relational aspects of writing. She has taught gender studies at Ambedkar University, Delhi, and has also conducted workshops on academic writing for university students. Good morning to you, Dr. Kachu. And now I'm going to hand the mic, as it were, over to Dr. Dasgupta and Dr. Kachu.
Thank you so much, Sameer. Hi, Vasudha. We are going to start this session now any second. I actually want to take a few minutes to thank Shiva first, because everything that Shiva said, I just felt like he stole all my thunder. He said pretty much everything that we are going to cover today. And everything he said about sentences being a way to organize our thoughts, and the pleasure of writing sentences, doing it without tears, how significant that is. And I'm glad he picked up on that, because we are hoping we can bring some of that to you today. So it's 9:54 now. Vasudha, do you want to say anything before we start with the protocol of the workshop, and then just start off with the workshop itself?
I also wanted to thank Shiva for such a wonderful welcome note that I think set out not just the task for the session that we're going to do, and maybe the conference in certain ways, but also its spirit. How do we approach writing? What do we enjoy about the sort of work that we do? What does writing contribute to the work that we do? I think I just wanted to thank him for expressing it all so beautifully. Thank you.
So time now to welcome all of you. I notice in the participant list there are about 283 of you signed in. This is the first for us. We've never conducted a workshop for 282 or 83 people together, that too online. Our understanding of writing workshops always is that it has to be in small groups and people have to write and we have to give feedback, and that's true. It's not untrue. But what we are trying out here today is an experiment for us. We hope it's successful. You will let us know at some point if it's successful or not. But it's really quite thrilling to see that there are 283 of you here right now. And the other challenging thing is that everybody, even as we saw in the chat messages just a few minutes ago, people are registered from all over the country. They are from all over different kinds of disciplines. There are scientists here, there are mathematicians here, there are social scientists there are humanities and literature people. There are students, I think, from school, college, MA students, PhD scholars. There are faculty members who teach. So this is really a very, very diverse group. And again, I have never done a workshop for such a diverse group together. So I've done workshops separately for school students or college students or PhD scholars or faculty, but I've never ever done a workshop for everyone together. Because what does that mean? It means that all of your needs are kind of different. All of you come with different skill levels, and also all of you are involved in different projects, right? Some of you are writing a PhD, some of you are writing school exams, right? Not the same things at all. So the challenge for Vasudha and me today is to do something where each of you can take something back from the workshop. Maybe everybody will not get everything, but I am hoping everybody will get at least one thing, if not more, right? Oh, and we have a message from Kiara Mehrotra to say not just country, we are here from Sydney, Ranjana and Kiara. Welcome, Ranjana and Kiara. I am really amazed that folks have logged in from Sydney as well. So now I think without further ado, I wanted to make this opening note so that you appreciate really like the kind of challenge this is for us today, and how excited we really are to be able to meet this challenge. And you will tell us later on whether we are successful or not. Samir will share a feedback link. In the meanwhile, just the protocols today, everybody is on mute, both audio and video, but you can put messages in the chat box. While Vasudha and I are busy, Samir is going to help us read those and keep track of any important comments that come in. Yeah, somebody just raised their hand. If you could just put your message in the chat box, Samir will draw our attention to it. We are going to do some exercises, so make sure you keep pen and paper handy, or you can type on your laptop, that's all right. But there will be a little bit of writing down that is going to happen as well. So with that note, I'm going to start sharing my screen, if that's all right with everyone. Okay, is everybody able to see my screen fully? Vasudha, is the screen visible to everyone? Yeah, great. Okay, so while I share my screen, I'm actually not able to see anyone, but that's all right. As I said, Vasudha and Samir will keep me updated if I need to know anything while I'm conducting this workshop. My part of the workshop, Vasudha is going to pick up from me, and then I'll finish up. So I'll just let you know what the structure for today's workshop is going to be. So what we hope to achieve today is, and the promise of the poster is that we are going to talk about academic writings, sentences that make their appearance in what we call academic prose. So while sentences appear in all kinds of writing, we are going to focus on sentences that come to academic prose. What they are, we are going to think about sentences in academic writing. And the way we are going to do that is we are going to identify some properties of sentences that make them identifiable as a part of academic prose. So that's part one. We are going to also show you the method we use to identify the properties. So the idea is not that we'll give you all the information in the world today. Obviously, we can't. But we're going to share the method by which you can do what we do today to other things, right? So we are hoping you learn the method that you can apply to other types of sentences than the ones we pick up. Remember, it's only an hour and a half and there's very little we can do. In that time, we hope to show you method that you can apply, utilize and apply on your own. And finally, the promise of the poster is that we hope you derive enjoyment, not just from this workshop and particularly from step 2. I really enjoy that. But also generally, think about why we can talk about writing sentences and talk about enjoyment in the same breath. Now, of course, we know the word sentence is both grammatical sentence, but it's also a double meaning for punishment, right? So when you're sentenced to do something, you're sentenced to prison, it means you're being punished to go to prison. So it's interesting that the word has both the connotations, and the fact that writing becomes so punishing for so many people perhaps comes from there. So let's see if we can unpack that and undo that so that we can even enjoy that a bit more. Okay. So as I started saying, we want to think about academic writing sentences. So the main question now to ask here is this: are there sentences that are specific to academic writing? Now, we put out a registration form where we had said, can you paste an example of a sentence that you enjoyed very much or that you found difficult to read? Many people didn't answer that. Many people actually picked up sentences that are not from academic writing, but from poetry or novels or whatever else. So the question here is, but sentences are sentences. Are there any that are specific to academic writing? But let me, in order to answer that question, actually ask that question.
Conference is being recorded.
The way that we can re-ask that question is, what is the work that sentences are expected to do in academic prose? If we rephrase that question, then it becomes easier to understand what sentences in academic writing are. And so one simple way we can answer that question is to say, whatever work it is that scholars do while reading, while researching, while conducting experiments, while doing interviews, while collecting data, everything that scholars do is probably the work of what sentences need to be able to do in academic prose. So what I've done in that green box, and I'm not going to read all of it out to you, but in that green box is a partial list and not full list, a partial list of the work that scholars and students do when they are in school or college or university, or when they're faculty and doing their own research, right? So what is the work that researchers and scholars do? They ask questions. They're able to list and describe methods and protocols of the work that they do. They're able to summarize ideas. And they are able to summarize ideas that they read in texts, books, articles, novels, reviews, doesn't matter what. They often are expected to have something original to say about stuff they've read, right? So if you've read a book, it's not enough to say what the main idea or argument in that book is, but also how you read it in a way that offers fresh perspective or understanding of the text that you read, right? So having something original to say that can be attributed to you, right? So and so, read this poem and interpreted it like this, and that's attributed to that particular scholar, is one of the things that scholars are supposed to be able to do, right? Then by studying all the material, scholars make claims, and their claims are often based in evidence. Not often, always. In fact, good claims have to be based in evidence, right? And this they have put together from their research. And what's the point of scholarship? The point of scholarship may be to understand the complexity of phenomena or ideas and to produce new knowledge and to communicate clearly to others so that they understand it. This clarity of communication is something that Shiva talked about in his introductory note, right? So if we look at these 7 points as the work that students and scholars do, then I'm going to say that the sentences that students and scholars write in the academic context of writing exam answers or research papers or books or chapters, doesn't matter what, then those sentences have to do all this work that we say scholars do, right? And as I said, it's a partial list. So when you sit down to think about it on your own, think about what is it that you are supposed to do as a student or a scholar, and understand that the sentences that you write in that context, in response to that work, actually has to do all that work, right? And I'll explain this further as we go along. So in our limited time together, we have just about an hour and a half today. We are going to do 3 things. We are going to look at 2 types of sentence structures: simple sentences and complex sentences. I'm not going to touch upon compound sentences, but the way that I build up simple and complex sentences today, I'm hoping you will be able to go online, pick up a book of grammar, and teach compound sentences to yourself on your own, right? And even this simple and complex sentence I'm going to touch upon in a very limited way, but I'm hoping it will become an example to help us see 2 kinds of things that scholars are definitely expected to do. They're expected to make claims, and they're expected to provide evidence for that claims. And we look at how simple and complex sentences actually can be useful in doing that. The second session will be with Vasudha, and she will look at a very interesting thing. She'll look at how the structure of the complex sentence can help produce complexity in thought. And I didn't put it very clearly in that green box, but I mean, it's alluded there, but I didn't quite put it like this. But scholars, part of the work of scholarship is that, right? To understand the complexity of phenomenon, to understand the complexity of ideas. So what is complexity? I mean, that's a very, very confusing thing to even understand sometimes. And we are going to say that if we understand the structure of complex sentences, it might help us with producing what our teachers or our peer reviewers will say, okay, this is very simplistic. Can you make it more complex, right? Can you complicate that thought? And we often don't understand what that means, but we are going to offer the structure of the complex sentences as a place where that can happen. It will just be 2 examples, but we are hoping it will be representative. And finally, this idea why sentencing need not be punishing, right? And can be playful. And a lot of you in your registration forms talked about jargon and difficulty of sentences, and Homi Bhabha and Gayatri Spivak, all the social science research scholars talked about that. And so I hope to touch upon what my take on jargon is, and then you're free to take from it what you would like. So these are the 3 sessions today. And before I jump right into simple sentences, I have a little note on grammar. And I want to confess, I'm not good at it. I'm quite bad at grammar. And the way that it's worked out for me is that I teach myself concepts slowly. And even the simple thing that I teach myself helps me with my reading and writing, right? I used to feel very sorry for myself and feel very ashamed about it. I've taught myself not to do that. There's no need to feel ashamed of it. English is often, for most of us, not our first language. It's not our native language, right? And we have taught ourselves English through school or college. Some people sooner, some people later. So then there is no, and there are other languages that we have. So it's all right if our grammar doesn't work. The thing is that we have to be open to teaching ourselves and fixing it and looking up. And I often don't, remember things. There's something called apposite essential that will come up today later on in Vasudha's talk. I knew what it was, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember what it was called. So I Googled it, I looked it up, I said, that's what it is. So there is no virtue in feeling that, oh, I am fantastic at grammar automatically or anything. I don't like the concept of grammar Nazis, for example. I think that gets in the way of learning and communication. Clarity of communication requires that our sentence and our syntax be clear, and we should be open to teaching ourselves. So by the way, if you ask me severely difficult questions about grammar in the chat box, I won't be able to answer it, and I'm confessing right away. So from the stuff that I've taught myself to do, I'll share 1 or 2 things with you today, right? And I promise that we're going to look at simple sentences and we're going to look at complex sentences, right? So let's start with a simple sentence.
Ananya, we have a request that you put it on slideshow so that the slide becomes a bit bigger.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, this slideshow actually makes it difficult for me to see the whole thing. How do I get rid of this banner? Can you just give me a second while I figure out how to get, because the banner then takes up space and I'm not being able to see my slides.
The banner on the right hand side with all our faces.
Yeah, right on top actually, where it says audio settings. Okay, I'll figure that out. Let's not waste time. So a simple sentence is what? A simple sentence at its simplest is 1 clause. And what is a clause? A clause in its most essential form is a noun and a verb. A verb is an action, and think about it logically. An action can't happen on its own. An action needs someone to do the action, right? So when you have a verb, you have to have a noun, right? Without a noun, there can be no verb, right? So this is called a bare clause. A bare clause is a noun and a verb, And by itself, we will call it a main clause. And a main clause like this is actually a simple sentence. It's a complete grammatical sentence, and it's called a simple sentence. So this list that I have for you here, believe it or not, is actually all grammatically correct sentence. It's a full sentence. Farmers protest, people care, time stops, pandemic rages, vaccines work, population increases, right? Believe it or not, actually believe it. Why will you not believe it? You can check up online later on and check grammar books, but these are all full grammatical sentences, and in its barest and simplest form, this is a full grammatical sentence which has one main clause, and a main clause will always have one verb and one noun. This is the minimumest requirement of a grammatical sentence, and you have it right here, right? Notice how on their own these sentences, declare or claim an idea. Farmers protest, people care, right? There's a declaration, there's a claim. Now we don't have a lot of details. When we read a sentence like this, we are like, well, which farmers, where, what are they protesting? What are they doing when they're protesting? None of that information is there. But the point is that this seeks this, when I put that sentence down, automatically the readers want to know more. And that's the function of claims. When we are writing in an academic paper and we make a claim, the idea is that the reader reads the claim and say, oh, interesting. Can you tell me more about that? How are you making that claim? What are the various parts of it? What is the evidence that you looked at that you can distill that and make this claim for us? So remember, that's how academic work functions. That's how academic papers function. And what you have on the screen right now is a bare clause with a noun and a verb. That's a complete grammatical sentence, right? Now, what we can do is we can take the verb and the noun and we can expand the details, right? It will still remain a simple sentence. It's just that there'll be more information, more qualifying information about the noun and the verb, and it becomes a longer sentence, gives more information. So for example, let's look at some of the examples I have on the screen. Farmers protest was our bare clause. Farmers from all over India protest what? Exploitative laws. So it's still a simple sentence. All I have added is more qualifying information about the verb and the noun. So when you are now thinking sentences, think bare clause, and then qualifying information for this bare clause. You can have adjectives, you can have adverbs, you can have put a preposition and say where, what, whatever. All that information can be added. But remember, all that information is only clarifying and qualifying the noun and the verb. So people care, right? Thoughtful people care about farmers. Population increases. Urban population increases how? Dramatically in times of failed harvest. So what is happening here is that when we think of a sentence and we start building from the noun and the verb, it's very empowering to know that after that, what we are adding to it is basically qualifying information about the noun and about the verb. And the sentence can get quite long, but remember, grammatically in terms of its structure, it is still a simple sentence, right? So notice how from a bare clause of a noun and a verb, we add information and we create what we are calling a simple sentence with qualifying information about the bare clause. Now, turns out that our life is complicated, our world is complicated, phenomenon is complicated. And if we have only bare clause and only the ability to add information to one noun and one verb, we are not going to be able to express ourselves, right? We need a lot more. I mean, just think about it. If I gave you only one noun and one verb and I said, that's it, you don't have anything else, would you be able to express anything that is happening to you or around you, right? Turns out it's not adequate. We need more. And how do we need more? One of the ways in which we can think about that qualifying information, I'm going to call, is one way in which we produce complex sentence. So we talked about simple sentence, one main clause. Now I'm going to introduce you to the idea of complex sentences. Now in the box here I have something called subordinate conjunctions. Don't worry about whether you know what subordinate is or conjunctions. Don't worry about, if you Google subordinate conjunctions, this list will come up. Just download it and keep it on your laptop. This set of words, this list is a very, very important and useful list. And even if we don't grammatically right now understand most of other things about it, I'm going to tell you one thing which if you just were to unpack, you could apply it to other things as well. So in order to, so if you look at this list of subordinate conjunctions, look at the kind of words there are. There's after, once, although, before, if, whenever, wherever, whereas, blah, blah. All of these words, interestingly, if you pick up this word, any one of these words or phrases and tag it in front of what we said was the where clause or a main clause or an independent clause, suddenly something happens to it. So let's look at an example. And I have picked up while, and I could have picked up although, I could have picked up even if, I could have picked up any other word, but I've decided today to pick up why, right? While farmers protest. And then the reader is like, yeah, okay. So while farmers protest, what happens? Doesn't feel complete. While thoughtful people care to lend support, yeah, okay. Then what else is happening? Continue, right? So turns out adding these words in front of the main clause, which was otherwise like a complete grammatical sentence, suddenly becomes incomplete. While urban population increases, and we are like, okay, I'm holding my breath. Can you finish your sentence, please? So turns out that there's a way in which that these qualifying words, that these subordinating conjunction, these words, and you can just keep this list next to you and tag it on to whatever you're writing and see what happens, right? So turns out it makes the sentence incomplete and it feels like it still needs something. So by doing this, what have we done? We have created subordinate clauses. And subordinate clauses, subordinate means it is subordinate to something. What is it subordinate to? It's subordinate to a main clause. Now, the minute we have done this and made it a subordinate clause, turns out in order for this to become a grammatical sentence, we will need another main clause. Now, without a main clause, you can't have a sentence. So heart of every sentence that you read or write is a main clause. If there's no main clause, there is no sentence, right? Now, around the main clause, you can have a subordinate clause that it also supports. You can have several main clauses. All that is a different story. But the heart of the matter is you need, if you have used a subordinate clause, you are going to need a main clause as well, right? So otherwise, this is incomplete. Otherwise, this is a sentence fragment. And so it's actually, so let's look at how we can finish that, right? So here we are, while farmers protest, that was on our list, roads are closed. Now, if you read just the red part, roads are closed is actually a full grammatical sentence. It doesn't need while farmers protest. But while farmers protest is incomplete in itself and will not be a full sentence unless we add roads are closed as well. So what I've done is I've got 3 examples from the ones in the previous slide. The part in red is the main clause, and if you read it only as main clause, you actually don't need the blue portion at all. But if you read only the blue portion, it doesn't work without the red part. So subordinate clause in blue on the left and main clause in red on the right. So now notice, and I want you to notice one more thing, that when we are writing a sentence like this with a subordinate clause and a main clause, we actually need a comma in between. So while farmers protest, comma, roads are closed. While urban population increases, rural population declines. While thoughtful people care, thoughtless people don't care, right? So when complex sentence begins, so what we notice is that, so these are all examples of now complex sentences. A complex sentence will have a subordinate clause and a main clause. And here's a little qualification. If the complex sentence begins with the subordinate clause, you put a comma. But what if you don't? What if you want to say, roads are closed while farmers protest? What happens to the comma then? I'm not going to tell you. Please Google it. Please teach yourself. And I can tell you that the rule is not the same, but you can figure it out. If you know what to look for, you can look for it and figure it out. So you have a little homework. What happens to the comma when the complex sentence begins with the main clause? Okay. So that's a little work for you to do later on. Now let's look at what is happening to our how to build slowly from the bare clause to the complex sentence. Let's look at the kind of things we can do. So we started with farmers' protest. Farmers from all over India protest exploitative laws. Remember I said bare clause you can add details to. Then old and young farmers from all over India expressed their protest against exploitative laws by blocking roads in big cities. Now look how the sentence has grown longer, but the bare clause is still the same. Farmers protest and everything else is qualifying information. It is still a simple sentence. Now I have a task for you and I'm going to give you 2-3 minutes to do this on your own, which is this. We took another, I'm taking another example from the list, people care. So in your notebooks, please do this task where you expand people care into 2 more sentences where you've added qualifying information about people and care and write 2 more simple sentences. So it will be simple sentence, but add qualifying information to both people and to care and see how that expands. So take a minute. Write it down, and if you like, you can please share your 2 more simple sentences about people care in the chat box, and either Samir or Vasudha will read them out to me. So do this quickly, don't take very long over it, there's a lot to cover today.
We have 1 sentence already.
Yeah, can you read that out, Samir?
This is from Aishwarya Murli, who writes, young people care for the old, and then writes, young people who are considerate care for the old people who are ailing.
Wonderful, wonderful, right? Excellent. Do we have others?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Sandeep Kumar writes, oh wow, so suddenly we have a lot of messages. So I have to scroll.
just
Sandeep
one
Kumar,
more, as long as people get the idea and I can move on. Yeah.
Sandeep Kumar writes, humble people care about being sensitive to others.
Humble people care about being sensitive. Wonderful. Again, qualifying information, and the notice how these sentences are so different too, right? One more, last one, Samir.
Lalit Sharma writes, people care about how they look.
People care about how they look. So depending on the information you use to qualify people and care, turns out the sentence can be built in infinite number of ways. But that's it. That's how sentences work, from middle outward, from small to big. And it remains. So right now we are still in the domain of simple sentence. Let's try out some exercise with the complex sentence now, right? So I've copied out the complex sentences on top. While farmers protest, roads are closed, right? So while farmers protest, subordinate clause, roads are closed, main clause. While old and young farmers from all over India protest exploitative laws, comma, the government responds by blocking all major roads to the capital city of Delhi. That should have been a little different. So what do we notice is that to be able to tell what are complex sentences, if we can figure out where the comma is. So while farmers protest, comma, roads are closed. And if I read roads are closed and I can tell that is the main clause, then I know that while farmers protest, comma, is a subordinate clause. So identifying the comma after the subordinate clause is a way to know whether a sentence is complex, a complex sentence or not, right? So, so you have these 2 examples, but then life, of course, gets damn complicated, and that's why you're here in this workshop. Suddenly, commas have grown in this sentence that I have got down. It's gone longer, it's grown. how do we tell where the subordinate clause ends and where does the main clause begin, right? Samir, do you want to read this out aloud for me, please?
Sure. While old and young farmers, many having walked bare feet, from all over India protest exploitative laws, the government deploys police force, seals borders, and blocks roads with metal thorns on all outskirts of the Delhi NCR.
Okay, so where is the so many commas now? How do we tell where it begins, where is the subordinate clause? How do we tell? What do we do now? And quite often in our academic reading of journal articles and books and chapters, this happens. We have these long sentences with so many commas and we're like, oh wait, where is the heart of it? What is going on? And one of the things you want to be able to do in a long sentence like this, where suddenly you look and there are so many commas and you want to figure out, the thing to do is to figure out what the bare clause is again. Of course, we are working with the same sentence so we can guess, but we will look at how that works also, right? So remember we said that a complex sentence has to have one main clause which works on its own and doesn't mean anything. So I'm going to read out the portion in the red. The government deploys, seals, and blocks roads, right? If you just read that sentence, it works, doesn't need anything else. Then when you go back to the beginning, while farmers protest exploitative laws, the government deploys, seals, and blocks roads. And you have basically the bare clause and you have where the subordinate clause begins. Now, turns out what we can do is we can start looking for information that is qualifying information and strike that out. Sometimes if the sentence is very long, if we try that, that takes us to the bare clause, right? So while old and young farmers, now old and young is qualifying farmers. So we cut that out. Many having walked bare feet. Notice these two, this part, many having walked bare feet is also between two commas, right? And it's in, and Vasudha will talk a little bit more about this in her section. Sometimes, and it turns out this information actually, if we read the sentence grammatically, everything that I've struck out grammatically is not required at all. Grammatically, for the sentence to work, if I read, while farmers protest exploitative laws, the government deploys seals and blocks blocks. That actually works. We get what it is, and so what happens to all the stuff that is struck out is basically stuff that is qualifying information about either the noun and the verb, right? So if we can strike that out, we are left with the bare clause, and that kind of helps us get what the main point of the sentence is, and then we are able to see the qualifying information for what it is. So this is one trick to read longer sentences where there are lots of commas. I'll just spend a minute over this bit. Many having walked bare feet, which is also between two commas, right? Now, between two commas inside a sentence where grammatically it's not essential, this information is called essential apposite, right? So, sorry, non-essential apposite. Non-essential because it is not a requirement in the grammatical form of the sentence, but apposite means something that's apt and required. So authors, writers need a lot of qualifying information in order to bring nuance to what is going on about the topic that they're writing. And quite often that information is crucial for the reader in terms of content, even if it is not required as a part of the grammatical requirement of the sentence. So while old and young farmers, many having walked bare feet, when does that information become relevant? When we read this part, the government deploys police force, seals borders, and blocks roads with metal thorns on the outskirts of. So there are people, there's metal strewn on the roads, and people are walking bare feet, right? So then turns out that writers often make these choices about what is qualifying information and what is essential information, what qualifying information you're going to add to the bare clause. So now what I have here is a sentence that I picked out from the registration form, and perhaps the person who wrote it is here. It's a long sentence. I'm not going to read it out entirely, but just to give you a sense, the portion that I have highlighted in red actually is the part of the bare clause that if we have a handle on, the rest of it begins to make sense. Notice also that there are 3 sentences here. 2 of them are simple sentences. One of them is actually a complex sentence. Somebody's raised a hand. Can we take the question? Jhansi Rani, I think, wants to ask a question.
Yes, Jhansi, please put in your question in the chat box. In the meantime, Ananya, we have a couple of comments.
Yes.
Apurva Tripathi says, you should not have struck out police force after deploys in the example sentence.
Okay.
Sandeep Kumar agrees with Apurva, and Apurva adds, I feel deploys is a transitive verb.
Okay, so that's possible. As I said, I'm awful at grammar, so I already gave you my disclaimer. And the point is not that. The point is not that not striking out. What did I do? Did I strike out? The government deploys police force. That I should not have struck out police force, because what is the government deploying? But actually, if you think about it, and you can work it out how you like. That's not the important point. The important point is that if I just said government deploys, that's actually a full grammatical sentence. If I just said the government seals, that's a full grammatical sentence, has the noun and the word. If I just said the government blocks, that's a full sentence, it has the bare clause. Now, typically we are taught sentences as subject, verb, object is probably the reason why folks are worried that I struck out police force, but it's okay to strike out police force at this point, I think. But the important, and there will be transitive verb, intransitive verb. We don't want to get into that complication right now. Those complications are things that individual scholars amongst you are at different levels and can build. So, think about the work of transitive verbs. Absolutely, do that for the sentences. But for the point that I'm making is, how do we differentiate between bare clause and qualifying information? That's all that I'm doing there. And in addition to that, aren't there other things I could have talked about? Absolutely, I could have. And people can pick up on what works for them and which level of grammatical complication they want to go to. That's not an issue with me at all. Did we get Jhansi's question, Samir?
Not yet, but Agniva Roy has a question.
Yes.
They write, does now what qualify as a sentence?
Sorry, what? Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear it.
Does, quote, now what, end quote, qualify as a sentence?
Okay, tell me which one is the verb there? Which one is the noun there? So the way to ask, so it turns out that, sentences use all kinds of rhetoric, right? And they make sense to us. But there are phrases, there are exclamations, there's all kinds of things. For the way in which we have to understand sentences at this point, I'm proposing a very simple format. I'm saying, take as the heart of a grammatical sentence the notion of the bare clause, which has to have a noun and a verb. If it has a noun and a verb, you have a sentence, right? Okay, so I'm going to move on. I know there are other questions, but we're also, we don't have a whole lot of time. So these are again examples from the registration form that I picked out, and I noticed that I have only 6 more minutes before Vasudha has to come on. So here the question is, and Samir, if you like, from the PPT you have, maybe you can paste these sentences in the chat box if people want to have them and look at them closely. I'm going to, so these are sentences that folks put in the registration form, and they all do, they're from, one of them is from, is by Robert Jervis, one is from Gautam Dhan. These are all sentences that, so can we apply what we have been looking at to these sentences, figure out what the bare clause is, and does looking at the bare clause help us understand what's going on with the sentences, right? So since we don't have a whole lot of time, just paste these sentences in the chat box so whoever wants to look at it closely can and figure it out on their own. But I'll just take us through it so that Vasudha doesn't get short-shifted from the amount of time she needs for her section. So how do we know which one is a complex sentence here? Right?
Ananya?
Yes.
Just a quick point. Supriyo Dev and Kavya G have raised their hands.
Yeah.
Supriyo and Kavya, if you could put in your comments or questions in the chat box.
So just take those questions, Samir. I will not be able to take all the questions right now. Just take the questions, and because also we are pressed for time, and I want Vasudha to have enough time for her section. So take the questions, and I'll try and get to it and answer it when Vasudha is doing her session, and I can look at the chat box.
Sure.
Okay. So which is the complex sentence? Although the prototype system demonstrated in this paper has mass powder flow rate that is lower than those used in practice, comma, with the use of larger capacity hoppers and nozzles aided with secondary gas flow and pressurized hopper, the flow rate and powder delivery speed can be increased. So I got this sentence, right? So when we are reading a sentence like this, does it help to know that it's a complex sentence? Does it help to know where the bare clause is? Does it help to figure out what all of this information is and what this sentence needs to work as a sentence and everything else is qualifying information, right? So if you look at the list that I gave you from subordinating conjunctions, although actually is one of them, right? Although blah, blah happened, and then comma, right? Although the prototype system demonstrated in this paper has a mass powder flow rate, right? So although the prototype has a mass powder rate and everything else is qualifying this bit of the information there, comma, with the use of large capacity hoppers and nozzles aided with secondary gas flow and pressurized hopper. So this is all qualifying information, because what's the part that can't work? The flow rate and powder delivery speed can be increased, right? So turns out that our bare clause is there, and if we can hold on to that, then we know that with the use of large capacity hoppers, nozzles aided with secondary gas flow, this is all qualifying information for us to make more sense of the noun and the verb in the bare clause, right? So, and this is clearly come from a researcher in the sciences, but even if I don't understand what mass powder flow rated, and I don't know what this is, I don't know what large capacity nozzles and hoppers are, I can still make sense of the sentence because I can identify what the bare clause is and what the subordinate clause is and where the main clause is. I'm going to read another one, and this is a very interesting one also. Over the past decade or so, psychologists and political psychologists have come to see, comma, so within brackets, or to quote unquote believe, question mark, that a sharp separation between cognition and affect is impossible, and that a person who embodied pure rationality, undisturbed by emotion, would be a monster if she were not an impossibility, right? And this is again, this is a sentence that's making a kind of a claim, but where is it making the claim? What claim is it making, right? And we can get to it if we can figure the noun and the verb, the bare clause. It will give us a handle on that. So over the past decade or so, okay, time, qualifying information, psychologists and so these are the nouns. Psychologists and political psychologists have come to see, right? Psychologists have come to see or come to believe something. That's your main idea there. What have they come to believe? That X and Y, sharp separation and cognition, whatever, is not possible, right? So turns out that the heart is there, that psychologists have seen or have come to believe something, and the rest is information about what they have seen, what they have believed, and the sentence progresses like that. So if the idea here is that we read a sentence and it sounds long, we can break it down. Even if there are things we don't understand about it, holding on to the structure of the sentence can often aid us with also understanding the content. So that's the idea that I'm suggesting here. The last example, vocabularies in one sense are maps of different life worlds and knowledge, including their hierarchies. And I love this sentence. So whoever put it in the registration form, put it as an example of a sentence they read and they loved, right? vocabularies, again, look at it, in one sense is not grammatically required. If I remove that part and read vocabularies are maps of different life worlds of knowledge, it would make sense, right? But then in one sense to say that this is not the only definition of vocabularies, vocabularies can be read in other ways, but I am reading it like this, that vocabularies are in one sense maps of different life worlds of knowledge, and then comma, additional information, including their hierarchies, right? So grammatically, if it's only vocabularies are maps of different life worlds, actually the sentence would work. Everything else adds to our appreciation of the sentence and also our knowledge and comprehension of a concept or of an idea. So what is the, and I'll end this session here by saying that a large part of the work of sentence in academic prose, sorry, it shouldn't be proses, it should be prose, is to make claims and produce evidence. Keeping a track of the bare main clause helps to see what kind of work the sentences are doing. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to invite Vasudha to take on from here without further ado.